In the exclusive, gated enclave of Pelican Bay, Florida, a silent invasion was about to begin. Pam Bondi's sprawling white mansion, flanked by manicured lawns and bristling with security cameras, stood like a monument to order and vigilance. The former Attorney General of Florida, known for her relentless war against drug cartels, sat in her study, unaware that her past was about to arrive with lethal intent. Under the pale wash of moonlight, 6 black SUVs glided down the private road, headlights off, engines hushed. Inside the lead vehicle, Marco El Serpiente Vasquez, lieutenant of the infamous Cartel, checked his weapon and spoke into his radio. "The prosecutor sleeps tonight, but she'll never wake. This ends now." What El Serpiente didn't know was that Pam Bondi rarely slept, and the mansion he approached wasn't just a home. It was a fortress, meticulously engineered by a woman who had spent decades locking away men like him. 3 years earlier, Bondi had overseen the extradition of the cartel's top boss. Now, 15 trained killers had come to repay the debt. But they were about to learn why underestimating a seasoned American prosecutor could be a fatal mistake. Bondi had served as Florida's top law enforcer for 8 years, becoming a living nightmare to traffickers across the southern border. Behind the camera-ready blonde hair and polished media presence was a will of steel. Now semi-retired and working as a legal consultant, she'd been receiving encrypted warnings from her old FBI contacts. They never forget, and they never forgive. She took that warning seriously. Her Pelican Bay estate, elegant on the outside, concealed a fortress-grade security infrastructure. Motion sensors blanketed the 3-acre grounds. The windows were bulletproof. A hidden panic room, stocked, for a month connected directly to federal authorities. And, most importantly, her hand-picked security team never left her side. Michael Reeves, a former Navy SEAL, monitored the perimeter from a retrofitted garage-turned-command center. Sarah Chen, ex-NSA cyber analyst, guarded the digital front. Robert Decker, a Marine with medical expertise, completed the trio. Movement north perimeter. Michael's voice crackled in Bondi's earpiece as she reviewed case files. His tone was even but urgent. "Multiple vehicles, lights out, this isn't a social call." Bondi calmly closed her laptop and shifted to the window, staying in the shadows as she'd been trained. "How many?" she asked, voice steady despite the adrenaline surge. 15 heat signatures. Armed. They're cutting power lines. She allowed herself a faint smile. "They think that'll help them." Backup generators kicked in instantly, but the exterior lights stayed dark. Let the intruders believe they had the upper hand. "Miss Bondi, I recommend moving to the safe room," Michael advised. "Not yet," she replied, pulling a small handgun from her desk drawer. "Let's see what they try first." Bondi wasn't just protected, she was prepared. Years of threats had honed her instincts. She'd trained for this. Outside, El Serpiente split his team into 3, 5 to the EI'd front, 5 to the rear, 5 around the perimeter. They moved with practiced silence, communicating in hand signals. The mansion appeared dark, vulnerable. "We need proof for the boss," El Serpiente told his lieutenant. "Photos. Make it messy. Let others learn." What the cartel didn't realize was that every step they took was already logged. Thermal cameras tracked their heat. Pressure plates registered every footfall. And inside, Bondi's team was orchestrating a defense years in the making. At the gate, the first team paused. The lock was open. "Too easy," muttered Diaz, El Serpiente's right-hand man. "Something's off." "She's a retired lawyer, not a general," his boss snapped. "Move in." In the command center, Michael watched the dots converge. "They're taking the bait," he noted to Sarah. "Definitely cartel," she replied, analyzing audio feeds, recording everything for FBI. As the first team pushed through the gate, silent alerts triggered. Michael's hand hovered over the countermeasure button. "Miss Bondi," he said. "First team's inside the outer perimeter. Your call." Bondi, now lit only by dim emergency lights, remained calm. "Let them get halfway up the drive. I want them committed." The men advanced cautiously, weapons drawn, confused by the mansion's silence. At the midpoint of the driveway, Bondi gave the signal now. Michael hit the button. Suddenly, the sprinkler system erupted, not with water but an oil-based irritant. It sprayed across the drive, burning skin and eyes, disorienting the intruders. They slipped, cursed, panicked. "Lights," Bondi commanded. Blinding. LED floodlights snapped on, washing the front lawn in searing white light, perfectly angled to disorient further. In the heart of Pelican Bay's meticulously guarded community, chaos had erupted. The hit squad on the driveway staggered blindly, hands shielding their faces, disoriented and fully exposed under the unforgiving glare of LED floodlights. "What's happening?" El Serpiente barked into his radio, but all he got back were panicked shouts and static. Unaware of their comrade's fate, the second team crept through the rear garden. As they neared the terrace doors, Robert activated Phase 2. Hidden speakers blared deafening police sirens while strobe lights erupted in every direction. "They think the cops are already here," Robert reported, watching the monitors with satisfaction. The rear team scattered, their coordination shattered. One man spun and fired at a shadow that turned out to be a statue. Two others collided head-on in the confusion. It was working. From his vantage point near the perimeter, El Serpiente realized the operation was spiraling out of control. "Hold your positions," he shouted. "This is a trap." But Bondi's team was just getting started. Sarah initiated the next phase, an electromagnetic pulse device installed after an earlier threat. Instantly, radios went dead. Phones were fried. Night vision goggles shorted out. "They're blind." "No comms," Sarah confirmed. "Third team is circling back toward their vehicles." "Perfect," Bondi replied. "Michael, Phase 3. With a nod, Michael activated the estate's final line of defense. Steel barriers rose silently from the landscaped grounds, cutting off all escape routes. The third team skidded to a stop, boxed in by metal walls that hadn't existed seconds before. Inside, Bondi moved into the panic room, now doubling as a secondary command center. Multiple screens displayed the unraveling operation outside. "Call it in," she told Sarah. "Active threat. 15 armed individuals." Sarah sent the alert through the FBI's direct response system. "Federal team inbound," she reported. "ETA 7 minutes. Outside, El Serpiente was livid. Half his men were down or trapped, the rest disoriented and useless. This was supposed to be a message. Instead, it was a disaster. "I'll finish it myself," he snarled, grabbing a weapon and moving toward a side entrance that appeared dimly lit and neglected. But appearances were deceiving. The vulnerable entrance had been left that way on purpose. As he worked on the lock, Robert watched from a concealed security station. "Target at the service entrance," he reported. "Permission to engage?" "Not yet," Bondi responded coldly, her eyes on the screen. "Let him feel like he's getting in. I want them all contained before the feds arrive." El Serpiente finally forced the door. Smirking, he entered what looked like a darkened laundry room. He crept forward, weapon drawn. Just as he reached for the inner door, the entrance slammed, shut behind him. Steel shutters dropped over the windows. Vents hissed, releasing a non-lethal but disorienting gas. Panicked, he fired blindly until the gas overwhelmed him. He collapsed on the floor. "Containment successful," Robert confirmed. "All intruders either incapacitated or trapped." The remaining cartel members were in full retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Exit routes were sealed, communications were down, and they couldn't even regroup. Throughout it all, Bondi remained focused, commanding her team with the same calm precision that had made her a nightmare for criminal organizations. As sirens finally grew near, she allowed herself a small controlled smile. "Sarah, prep the footage for the FBI. Michael, maintain containment until every zone is cleared. Robert, stand by for medical support. No one dies on this property, even them." The cartel had sent 15 trained assassins to silence one woman. They found themselves outgunned, outplanned, and awaiting federal charges, without a single shot fired by Bondi herself. Federal agents swept through the grounds, securing the scene with methodical precision. Once the area was cleared, FBI Special Agent Derek Thompson, a veteran of cartel investigations and longtime ally of Bondi, approached the front steps. "Madam Attorney General," he greeted her with a professional nod. "Your defenses were impressive." "I've made enough enemies to justify the expense," Bondi replied with a faint smile, "though I didn't think they'd be quite this bold." As they walked toward the command center, Thompson shook his head in disbelief. 15 cartel gunmen and not one got past the perimeter, except Serpiente, and he walked straight into your trap. That entrance was designed for this exact scenario, Bondi explained. People always go for the path of least resistance. We made sure it looked like one, but it wasn't. Across the driveway, agents processed the arrested men. Some were still dazed from the chemical deterrents. Others sat in stunned silence, their plans in ruins. In the back of an FBI vehicle, handcuffed and seething, El Serpiente stared daggers at Bondi as she emerged. "You knew we were coming," he growled in accented English. Bondi walked up to the window, calm and composed. Her security team held back, giving her the space. "Mr. Vasquez," she said coolly, locking eyes with him, "I've been expecting someone like you for years. The only surprise was how badly you underestimated me." Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "When you target a prosecutor," Bondi said, stepping closer to the transport vehicle, "you should expect they understand the concept of defense in depth." El Serpiente spat in her direction, but missed. "The cartel doesn't forget." "Others have come before you," she replied evenly. "They're all serving multiple life sentences. You'll have plenty of company." As she turned away, Special Agent Thompson approached, handing her a tablet already loaded with data pulled from the attackers' phones and gear. "This wasn't just a revenge hit," Thompson said grimly. "Based on the communications we've recovered, they were sent by Xavier Mendoza himself." Bondi raised an eyebrow slightly. Mendoza was the newly crowned head of the Kaloa cartel, having ascended after she helped dismantle his predecessor's empire. "He's getting desperate," she said, "if he's sending his people this deep into U.S. territory." "Desperate men make mistakes," Thompson nodded. "This attack gives us probable cause to escalate. The intelligence from tonight will set his operation back years." Michael stepped forward, offering Bondi a secure phone. "Director Davis from Homeland Security is on the line, ma'am." Bondi took the call. As she listened, the full weight of the evening's events began to settle in, not as trauma, but as strategic victory. What the cartel had meant as a show of strength had become their most public failure. 15 of their operators were in custody. Mendoza's direct links were now on record. And federal agencies had the legal basis for a sweeping new round of investigations. At the community gates, news vans were already arriving, alerted by police scanners and the heavy FBI presence. By sunrise, the headlines wouldn't tell the story of an assassination attempt. They'd tell the story of a humiliating collapse. "The director wants to ensure you have additional federal protection until this is resolved," Michael told her as she ended the call. "That won't be necessary," Bondi replied. "The best protection I have is making sure everyone knows exactly what happened here tonight." She glanced toward the road where a detained El Serpiente was being transferred into a high-security transport van. "The cartel thrives on fear and invincibility," she continued. "Tonight shattered that illusion." As dawn broke over the estate, agents moved swiftly across the grounds. The last of the attackers were loaded into federal vehicles. Crime scene techs documented the perimeter, photographing Bondi's fortress-like security system. Sarah had already handed them full recordings from every angle, ensuring airtight evidence. Bondi stepped out onto the upper terrace. Below, the chaos of the night was giving way to order. Relief washed through her, but also something colder, harder, satisfaction. She had faced down intimidation, not with panic, but with preparation. Robert joined her with 2 cups of coffee. "They never should have come here," he said. She accepted the cup gratefully. "No," she agreed, "but I'm almost glad they did. Now everyone can see what these organizations really are. Vulnerable, predictable, beatable, Below, El Serpiente was loaded into the armored van. He looked up one last time, expecting to see the woman he came to kill broken or afraid. Instead, she stood above him, unflinching, unharmed. It was an image that would soon be broadcast across the country, and, across the border, straight into the heart of cartel territory. Xavier Mendoza would learn that targeting Pam Bondi hadn't just failed, it had backfired. 3 weeks later, Washington, D.C. Pam Bondi stood behind a podium at the Department of Justice. The media buzzed in anticipation. The nation had followed, the story from the moment it broke. Now it had become something bigger, a symbol. What happened at my home, Bondi began, her voice firm and clear, was not just an attack on one person. It was an attack on our justice system, an attempt to silence those who uphold the law and defend our communities. Behind her stood the director of the FBI, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and prosecutors who had worked alongside her on cartel cases. This wasn't just a press conference. It was a declaration. I am proud to announce, Bondi continued, that as a direct result of the intelligence gathered from the 15 individuals who attacked my property, federal agencies have now executed coordinated raids across 6 states and 2 countries, seizing more than $300 million in cartel assets and arresting 27 high-ranking members of the Kalawa organization. The press room erupted, shouts, camera flashes, a sea of hands rising. Bondi raised her own for silence. She continued, Xavier Mendoza, who ordered the attempt on my life, was apprehended yesterday in a joint U.S.-Mexico operation. His effort to silence me has instead dismantled much of his network and ended his brief reign as the cartel's leader. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. What had been intended as a demonstration of cartel strength had instead revealed its weakness. Mendoza had tried to make an example of Bondi. Instead, he became the example. After the press conference, Bondi returned home to Florida, where her estate had become something of a legend. Security firms requested tours to study its defenses. Law enforcement agencies asked her to brief their teams. She declined most of the offers, preferring to let the mystery surrounding her preparations speak for itself. One evening, as she sat in her study, the same room where she'd received the first alert of the raid, Michael entered carrying a carefully screened package. It's from Judge Martinez, he said, placing it on her desk. Inside was a framed newspaper clipping. The headline read, Cartel Kingpin Mendoza. Sentenced judge cites Bondi precedent in maximum security. Order tucked beneath was a handwritten note. They came to make an example of you. Instead, you made an example of them. The Bondi precedent will protect many others. Thank you for your courage. Judge Sofia Martinez Bondi smiled, placing the frame beside her legal texts and case files. Throughout her career, she had faced threats, smear campaigns, assassination plots. There had been moments of doubt, moments when the cost of justice seemed impossibly high. But that night, the night of the raid, had answered her question once and for all. Later that week, a small group of current and former state attorneys general gathered at her home. They had come to discuss security protocols for prosecutors handling cartel cases. Bondi welcomed them personally. The mood in the room was one of mutual respect and open curiosity. The most important thing to understand, Bondi said as they sat in her living room, is that physical defenses are just the start. What really defeated them was preparation, intelligence, and an understanding of how these organizations think. She explained her team's philosophy, not just the high-tech barriers or surveillance, but the strategic misdirection, the psychological traps, the calculated projection of weakness where strength waited underneath. We designed our defense to exploit their assumptions, she said. They expected a soft target, a retired prosecutor living in luxury. What they found was a calculated adversary who had already predicted their every move. One visitor, a newly elected attorney general from Texas, asked what everyone else was thinking. Aren't you worried about retaliation? Another faction might see this as a provocation. Bondi's response was calm and coldly rational. The most dangerous position, she said, is to appear vulnerable and be valuable. I chose to show, without ambiguity, that attacking me carries a cost they cannot afford. This isn't about being intimidating, it's about being a hard target not worth the risk. As the discussion stretched into the evening, Bondi shared something she hadn't revealed to the press. The night of the attack, she said quietly, I wasn't just protecting myself. I was thinking about every prosecutor, judge, and law enforcement officer who's been threatened, every one of us who's ever stood between criminal empires and the communities they exploit. She looked around the room, meeting each of their eyes. They came to break me. Instead, we've shown the world they can bleed. We need to make one thing clear to criminal organizations everywhere. Our justice system will not be intimidated. For every threat they make, they only strengthen our resolve. In the months that followed the attempted raid, law enforcement agencies across the country reported a significant decline in threats against prosecutors and judges handling cartel cases. The phenomenon became known as the Bondi precedent, a shift in the calculus of fear that once emboldened criminal syndicates to use intimidation as a weapon. A year later, Pam Bondi published a best-selling book, Standing Firm: How America Can Win the War Against Cartel Intimidation. It quickly became required reading at the FBI Academy, law schools, and federal training centers nationwide. In it, she wrote, "The greatest weapon in the arsenal of any criminal organization isn't their firepower, it's the fear they spread. But when we refuse to be intimidated, when we turn their attacks into their own defeats, we don't just protect ourselves. We protect the very foundation of justice upon which our society depends." Her estate in Pelican Bay remained her home, its defenses updated but discreet, largely invisible to casual observers. To the outside world, it looked like nothing more than the elegant residence of a retired public servant. But in the eyes of law enforcement and the criminal underworld, it had become something more, a symbol, a warning, a fortress that had repelled the storm. As for El Serpiente and his team of assassins, they now served multiple life sentences in maximum security federal prisons, scattered across the country, deliberately isolated from each other to prevent them from maintaining cartel connections. What was meant to be a brutal message of cartel, vengeance had become something else entirely. A case study in how justice prevails when courage is matched with preparation. The message was clear, and it echoed far beyond one mansion in Florida. In the long, grinding battle between law and lawlessness, between justice and fear, there is always risk. But there is also power in readiness, power in principle, power in refusing to back down. Because sometimes, the hunters become the hunted, and a night meant to be. A tragedy becomes a triumph of justice. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who values stories of justice, strategy, and the courage to stand tall in the face of intimidation. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories like this one. Your support helps us continue to share these powerful accounts, reminders that in the face of darkness, it's courage and preparation that light the way forward. And as Pam Bondi proved, sometimes the best defense isn't just in the walls you build, it's in the unshakable message you send. You will not be intimidated.